Welcome to Motherhood in ADHD. I'm your friend, Patricia Sen. My mission is to be a lighthouse for mothers with ADHD, helping you find your path to success by learning to appreciate your ADHD as an asset. I'm seeking to change the paradigm that ADHD means your life is doomed to be a hot mess. So I'm sharing strategies and encouraging you in your pursuit of happiness to love who you are every day of your ADHD life. Hey there, successful mama. It's your friend, Patricia. It's funny. I can already hear it in my voice. I'm having a serious episode today, so just wanted to start with the disclaimer that, normally my podcast is pretty kid-friendly, but today we will be talking about some serious topics, and they are not kid-friendly. So I would go ahead and pop in those earphones at a time where you can to listen to this episode. So just a fair warning on that. So we just did an episode about the big leap, and we were talking about upper limiting. And I realized this weekend I was upper limiting. We were coming back on a Sunday after a great vacation. We'd taken a long weekend out to Fredericksburg, which is in the wine country of Texas. And we had a really great weekend. We had a relaxing time. We enjoyed it. The kids had fun. It was great. And we're driving home. It's about 4 hours away. And I felt my anxiety bubbling up. I felt it just starting to push. And I kept imagining all these terrible things happening. It's like, brain, why are you doing this? But it's like, I start thinking about what if we get a car crash? What if one of my kids starts choking in their car seat and I can't get them out in time? I mean, literally, it's all these crazy scenarios that are highly unlikely. I mean, obviously it's possible, and even now, as I'm talking about, I can feel my breathing's getting a little tight and all. The anxiety was just bubbling right at the surface and I couldn't turn it off. I have my toolkit of tricks. I'll talk about that at the end of the episode of what I do. And it's just nothing was really working. Obviously, I was stuck in a car, so there's only so much I could do, and everybody was sleeping, so I was trying not to make my husband pull over and get out of the car. But I ended up on Instagram, which I hardly ever do in the car because I get car sick. And I was scrolling for a second, just trying to distract myself, and I came across the ADHD Good Life, and she was posting about her anxiety, and I was like, oh, that's a great idea. I need to talk about this. I need to get it out in the open. And it just made me feel so much better that I wasn't alone. I could see she was struggling with not the same thing as me, but a similar thing. I wasn't alone. And I think that makes such a difference when we're struggling, is knowing that we're not alone. So I am going to get super raw and honest here and talk to you about my journey with anxiety. And so bear with me. Hopefully I can hold it together the entire episode, because I want to share with you what works for me, because I know that while I can't change how my body and brain are made, I can help myself by doing a lot of things that I'll talk to you about in a little minute, and just rewiring my thought process to help me get through when the anxiety is rearing its ugly head. So start at the beginning. When I was a kid, I was always described as anal retentive, kind of OCD little kid. I think exercising control over things was how I felt in control. But it was almost a little bit too paranoid. Things had to be exactly like I wanted them, or else I didn't feel in control. And I can think back, I'm sure it happened, it started when I was younger, I'm sure. But one of my first few memories of really dealing with the anxiety was probably fourth grade. We would do these timed math tests where you had, I can't even remember how much time, but say it was 5 minutes to finish those math fact sheets. And it had, 100 math facts where it was 2 plus 1, 5 plus 7. 3 plus 2. You just had to go boom, boom, boom and answer them all. It gave me so much anxiety trying to pass these tests. I did fine on addition and subtraction. Multiply took me a little bit of time. Division was so hard. And there were kids slapping me because my teacher had it on the wall where it showed when you passed it, you got your name on the board. And there were kids who were going around for the second time and dropped down to 4 minutes to do them all. And I was still the only student that was still on division for the first round. And it was hard to deal with, y'all. That was a clear moment in my life where I remember being this is hard and I don't like this failure. And then I can think about in 5th grade is when I started to have more responsibility in turning things in. I started turning things in late. And I got my first detention in 5th grade for turning 3 homework assignments in late to Miss Kodak. Miss Kodak scarred me for life. Just kidding. It was a good lesson I needed to learn. But, the anxiety of, I knew when I had forgotten to turn that last thing in, it was Friday after school, and I went in the room and I stuck it in her box and hid it under some other stuff. Like maybe she wouldn't notice that my paper was there the whole time. I don't know. Fifth grade brains, you never understand those kiddos. But I just remember like that anxious feeling of, oh my goodness, I know I didn't turn this thing in, and I was trying to fix it, but it was too late. I had to turn it in by the end of the day, and it was already after school, in order to avoid a detention. And I can think back to like summer camp. I think it was between 5th and 6th grade. It might have been 6th and 7th, but I went to sleepaway camp for 2 weeks for the first time. And the whole time I was gone, I was having nightmares about my family's house burning down and everybody dying while I was at summer camp. And it was awful. I had horrible stomach cramps. Every day I would go to the nurse's station and get Pepto-Bismol, which I think was just her way of like making me feel like mentally better, but not actually physically better, and like sending me on my way. I was just like so stressed about the whole thing. And I think while I did adapt and like learn a lot of strategies to make sure that I didn't mess stuff up, my ADHD often caused me to forget or be careless about. It did not help in the fact that I developed this extra level of paranoia and a strict way of doing things. I had to have it done my way to feel in control, which, when you're in that high alert state and when you have ADHD, you function better that way. But also that improved productivity comes with the trade-off of that stress level is not good for you, especially now when how old are 5th graders? 10, 11 years old? Like that was way too much stress for a tiny human to be carrying around all the time. And I was recently reading the E-Myth book. It's a book about business. So if you own your own business, I really enjoyed the book. But he was talking about how when you're creating your business structures, you can't become efficient when you're in a state of emergency. So you have to like create your efficiencies from a calm state of mind. And I realized like quite often in my childhood, I was in this state of emergency, of panic and overwhelm, which means I wasn't being efficient in what I was doing. And I feel like I don't necessarily have any standout moments from middle school and high school. So I feel like just as a general idea, like because I was so shy and anxious, I didn't talk to people. And I still remember like towards the end of high school, it's probably like junior or senior year, this kid, my maiden name starts with a T. And so it was another kid with last name T who was in my homeroom, all 4 years. I was TA and he was TE. I still remember him turning to me one time, like he was struggling with something and I offered to help him. And he goes, "You're really nice. I always thought you were such a snob because you never talked to me." I was like, what? I was like, I think you're kind of a doofus, but why would you think that? And like that was that moment of I never realized that me not talking made me look rude. It just never occurred to me. It's because when we have ADHD, we're very socially unaware, and it never occurred to me. I was afraid to talk because I was afraid to be judged for what I said. I was very scared all the time. Also not saying something, still said something. Anyways, I just kind of like flew under the radar. I did well, but I kept to myself. I had a really great circle of friends, but it was small. And I obviously was myself with them, but at school as a whole, I was just very quiet. And I think that my anxiety definitely drove that decision in my personality. Now, when I hit college, though, I'm going to do an episode shortly about kind of like my life story. So I won't get into all the details in this one because I really want to focus in on the anxiety portion today. But in my freshman year, when I got my diagnosis of the ADHD, because I almost had failed out, I really hit a rough depression. Things started to not go well for the first time for me. So then I had the double-edged sword of the anxiety of it not going well, plus the depression because it wasn't going well. And like, I was in a really bad spot. And then it got worse after I was raped my sophomore year. So it literally was just this tornado of terribleness that first 2 years of school. It got to the point where I was pondering suicide. And I don't tell people that very often. I remember one day walking to work and the like public bus was coming and I was thinking like, what if I just stepped out in front of the bus right when it got close so the driver couldn't stop in time? Thankfully, I talked myself out of it because I was like, well, that's not fair to do to the driver. That would have been totally my fault. I don't want them to think it was their fault. I don't want them to have to live with that. And so that's how I talked myself out of it, which sounds like totally crazy now that I say it out loud. But it was a really hard time. Thankfully, I was on medicine and I was seeing a psychiatrist and I ended up working through that. I'll talk next week about some of the great women at school who helped me get through that tough time in my life where I learned a lot of skills on like, how do you learn to take notes in class and like read for the important important stuff in your textbooks. I had to learn all that, and I just kind of like skated through it in high school. It was easy enough that I didn't have to work that hard. I just did the work and it was fine. I got through it and I survived, and I thought that I had moved past that because I'd gone through other tough things since then. Like my mom passed away when I was shortly out of college, and I ended up moving back home and helping my dad with my siblings who were still in high school. They were 15 and 16 at the time. I got through all that without the resurfacing of all the depression and anxiety. And I thought, hey, cool, like I'm making progress. Like that was a really hard time and I prevailed. So I think I got this covered now. Fast forward a few years, probably 10 years, when I had Elijah, I had really bad postpartum anxiety, and I wasn't even sure what it looked like beforehand. Like I'd heard about the term, but I didn't know what it was. Thankfully, a few months before, when I was pregnant, a good friend of mine who has a son who's almost a year older than Elijah, she had come to me and told me her story about her postpartum depression with her son. I remember watching her because she had moved away in the time that she was pregnant and had her son. And to see the difference between, like, she came back for a visit and I was like, who is this person? She looks so different. It was very much weighing on her, not only the changes of motherhood, but like the depression. You could see that she just like wasn't herself. But thankfully, she was so open with me and told me about it and explained like how she felt and what she did. And so I had this life preserver from Jenny that this could exist, and it was a thing that was real and not made up, and how to reach out for help. So fast forward a few months when I had Elijah, and I was probably about a month postpartum, and I realized like this is not how I should be feeling. Something's wrong. I worried about everything. I worried again about like crazy things that weren't even going to happen. I worried that somehow I would cause him harm, that I would cause him death, that I would drop him, that I would injure him. I worried about if he was sleeping. Every time he made a noise, I would wake up thinking something was wrong. I would just have these visions or like daydreams of what happens if he gets sexually abused. What am I going to do? Like I literally was running through all these crazy worst case scenarios in my head that were highly improbable, but yet still caused me great strife. And obviously I can look back at it now and be like, wow, that was a problem. For sure. But when you're in the midst of it, you don't realize you're drowning when you're drowning. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just was so wrapped up in how hard it was. Granted, I got an expert level baby, y'all. Elijah was a really hard baby. Like he didn't sleep well. He didn't eat well. He wasn't breastfeeding right. He wasn't getting enough milk. He would cry all the time. He always had to be held. He was an expert level baby. And I can say this because with experience now, I had my second son and he was a breeze compared. After I had Joseph, I was like, wow, this is why people like babies. Who knew? I literally had no idea why people liked babies after my first kid. I was like, why do people do this more than once? It was hard. So like you take the fact that he was a hard baby, plus you throw in all the hormones, plus you throw in my predisposition for mental health issues. And it was like this terrible cocktail of bad things. And I remember he was probably like 2 weeks old, and I turned to my husband and I was like, I want my old life back. Like, how do I give this baby back? I don't want to do this anymore. That right there is like, red flag, something's wrong, something's wrong. And the other part that like really makes it stick out to me is knowing when I was in it, I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I never pictured the newborn phase as a phase. I just felt like I was in this horrible place that was never going to end. Like I was always going to have a newborn. 10 years from now, I was still going to be up at 3 a.m. with a newborn every night. I couldn't see past the current stage to the future. It just didn't even exist. And that's the times where you know, like, this isn't just, oh, I'm having a rough time right now. This is an actual issue that we need to address because the realities weren't lining up. It wasn't logical in the way I was thinking about it. Now, if you've never had anxiety, I'll share like how it feels when like a panic attack or like anxiety is bubbling up at the surface. And I apologize, this is like the worst analogy ever, but it's like when you have to vomit. You know, like when you get the stomach flu and you have this violent vomit sensation, you're like, oh, I'm going to throw up. And like you are doing everything in your power to like push it down long enough to be able to run to a trash can. And like, you know, at that moment, do I have enough willpower to make it to a trash can? Do I have enough willpower to like make it all the way to the bathroom? Or if you're a pregnant lady and you have morning sickness, which I did with both my pregnancies, which probably didn't add, now that I think about it, to my mental state after childbirth. Like I threw up my whole pregnancy with both Elijah and Joseph. When you get to that expert level of it's no longer morning sickness, it's like all day sickness and all pregnancy sickness, I had the esophagus of steel. I could hold down vomit for way longer than I ever thought possible. Like I could finish entire meetings at work and then be like, okay, I'm glad this is over. I got to go to the bathroom, and then go throw up 10 minutes later after I originally felt like I was going to throw up. But you can only like delay it for a little bit. There's that force of it coming up. You can't stop it. You know you're going to have to throw up. Hopefully you can shove it down, but like it's pretty slim. When you get that violent stomach bug, you're not holding on to it and letting it pass. The only time I can think of when you can do that is if you have motion sickness. I get that too. Getting super nauseous and you're like trying to hold it in. Like sometimes you can hold that in, but it's rough. Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry. This is like the worst analogy ever. But just to like add a little more on the analogy, I still remember the first time Elijah really threw up. I want to say he was like to just turn 3. He was old enough to like know what was going on, but like surprised himself that he was just, what is going on with this? Like, why is this happening to me? And I remember like he's looking at me with eyes like saucers, and he's like just keeps saying, make it stop, make it stop. He couldn't control it. It was like his body was acting out of his own volition. He was just like, what do I do? I can't control this. I don't know what's going on. And thankfully he wasn't a puker, so he had never really experienced that until that point. Truly had no idea what's going on. That's how people feel when they first get anxiety. It's like, I don't know what this is and I don't know what's going on and my body is weird and I don't understand. And so it's scary because your body is doing something that you can't control. I think back to when he was throwing it up. Here I am standing next to him. I'm like coaching him and I'm like, I know, buddy, I'm sorry. I can't make it stop. We just have to get through it. Lean for the bucket. Don't worry about the mess. We'll clean it up later. Just get all the yucky out of your tummy, and like coaching him through it. To deal with your anxiety, you have to learn how to do that coaching for yourself. You can obviously find someone to help you walk through it until you can do it yourself. But like the goal is for you to be able to coach yourself through it so that you can make it through the panic attack or through that anxiety episode. And while it's still terrible, at least you have the skills to deal with it. So I recognize that I can't change the way my body and brain were created, but I can teach it how to rewire the connections to better negotiate the obstacles I'm dealing with through my mindset and the tools that I've accumulated. So now that you know all my drama, let me tell you about what I do to get through the vicious cycle. At the beginning, you need to talk to somebody. You have to tell a friend, a family member, a professional, get some help. I'm very lucky that I had Jenny to connect with me and tell me that this exists. You know, when I realized I was having the problem, I called her and was like, who's your doctor? I need an appointment. And then while that doctor wasn't taking new patients because she was too full, she connected me with another doctor who specialized in postpartum, and that allowed me to connect with somebody. I still see her now because I'm weaning off my medicines from Joseph's birth. It also helped that my husband was really supportive. I mean, he was totally clueless and didn't know what to do with me when I was a big hot mess after I had Elijah, but I appreciate that he was supportive and said, yeah, we do need to see someone. He made sure that I made the appointment when I was kind of like flip-flopping around of like, okay, maybe I'm fine. And he was like, no, you really need to go make that appointment. 2, learn as much as you can about it. Knowledge is power, and knowing that what you're going through, other people go through, it's like a thing, it's real, it's not made up, it's not in your head. That makes so much of a difference in your mental state. And then you want to know, what are your signals? What are your past reactions? I learned this from Brene Brown in her book about shame, which all of a sudden I can't remember the name of. I'll put it in the show notes. She talks about when you start feeling shameful, shame's creeping in, how do you feel? And so I think about that in terms of my anxiety. When I start to feel anxious, I know that my stomach starts cramping, my heart starts pounding, it gets hard for me to breathe. I start hyper-focusing on negative thoughts. I get over-controlling about things. The paranoia tape starts playing in my head, just that negative thoughts over and over and over again. I have trouble sleeping. So I know what are the things I need to watch out for. Like when I see those coming, I know, okay, I see this coming, and I can make a more educated and proactive decision on how I'm going to deal with it rather than it surprising me like it had in the past. Number 4, know your triggers. Know what's going to set you off. Know what things make it worse, and then try to avoid those things until you can dissolve those problems. Like if your mother-in-law is giving you anxiety, maybe you need to not hang out with your mother-in-law quite so often in the next few months. I'm not saying don't hang out with her ever, but like give yourself some space as you work on you until you can deal with that. You know what I'm saying? Okay, number 5, create a plan for improvement with an expert's help. See a professional doctor and then figure out how you need to work this plan. I chose to take medicine, and I know not everybody is for medicine, but it's one of those things where like, okay, I probably could do this eventually without medicine, but I didn't want to wait that long. I didn't want to suffer anymore. I wanted to move on and get better. And so for me, the medicine allowed me to do that, calm the environment so that I could focus on how to get better. And then I weaned off the medicine. Like when you sign up for medicine, you're not signing up for anxiety medicine for forever. You use it until you can build the skills you need to be able to handle it on your own. Now, there are some people that are going to have to take it forever, but know that like you can choose at any time to stop taking the medicine. You need to wean appropriately. Don't just like abruptly stop taking things. You'll mess yourself up, but it's not a forever decision. So, let that weight go. The next part of my care plan is self-care. If I'm feeling anxious, I like to go outside, take a walk, just breathe in some fresh air. That always helps me. Exercise helps. Really focusing on my health and doing something for me. I always work in at least one self-care thing every week. Sometimes it's, I love my mani-pedis, or like I get a massage. And then sometimes it's just like watching terrible TV before bed, like one of my guilty pleasure shows, like, The Bachelorette or something. Whatever just makes you feel better. I get enjoyment out of like yelling at the people on TV and being like, why are you doing that? This is a terrible decision. Part 3 is simple routines. Sometimes you just need to focus on getting dressed, getting out of the house, basic things like that, doing those every day without fail to propel yourself into doing things like you should. And the last one's positive thinking practice. When you are stressed, you revert back to your highest level of training. And so I practice being positive for those times where I don't feel positive. I say affirmations and put positivity into my brain when I don't have it there to draw from. But I have to have practiced that, or that's not going to be my reaction to be positive when I'm struggling. And then the last thing is I would call it like my hurricane kit of like 2 or 3 things that when you're in a funk, you feel the anxiety like starting to onset. Like what can you do right then to start to like reverse the direction and be proactive so that you don't get stuck in that? For me, it's going outside, doing some deep breathing. I like to narrate the situation out loud because if I put it into words, it feels like kind of silly that I'm getting upset about something that maybe isn't that big of a deal. It's easier for me to work through it if I hear it out loud. And then repeating my affirmations and positive thoughts to like change the direction of my mindset, because your thoughts control so much of your life. I mean, your brain's the control center for your body. And if your brain is on positive action, then you're going to see that result in your life. So, mama, that was kind of cathartic, but really scary to put all that business out in the open. But I really hope that it helps someone, that it reaches someone who needed to hear that and know that they're not alone. Anxiety is a very real and crippling thing. And I want you to know that there is hope, there's light, and there is a way to be proactive so that you're not stuck in that horrible, horrible space for longer. So please reach out for help. And I hope that this was encouraging for you. So sweet mama, have a wonderful, wonderful week. And I hope that you will share this podcast with someone who you think would make a difference in their lives so that we can keep spreading the positivity for all the mamas to hear. All right, successful mama, you have an amazing week, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to Motherhood and ADHD. For more resources, head over to our website, www.motherhoodandadhd.com.